Hi, it's the Boffin again, and today I'm going to take on the task of replacing the batteries inside my shaver. This is a Braun, it's a 7526, and apparently inside are just a couple of AA nickel metal hydrides. Let's take it apart and have a look. Now, apparently inside this, to get in, I just have to pop this back cover off. That seems straightforward enough. And then the sides come off. And it's a mess inside. Now, 4 screws, they look like small Torx. Probably about this, which is a T8. And sure enough, and then it all comes apart. And sure enough, inside are a couple of AA batteries. Hopefully the circuit board just lifts out. It does. Oh, isn't that very neat? Very neat and tidy. A bunch of whiskers inside. On the back we have the microcontroller. Let's zoom in and have a closer look here. So this is the microcontroller that probably controls all aspects of the device. We have 2 AA batteries. It looks like they're wired in series from here to here to here to here. They're in with their AA's with pins. I don't have that, so we'll have to see if we can't find an inventive way of solving that problem. So the first thing to do is to get these out of here, and that's going to involve the soldering iron. So it looks like the battery is in series from here to here via that track and back over here. I think the next trick is to see if we can get that battery out of here. Here's the circuit board that's inside. As you can see, there's just 2 standard AA nickel metal hydride rechargeable batteries. On the back side we have the circuit board which controls everything. Likely that's just a MOSFET. I can't read the numbers from here. The battery's in serial here to here to here to here. Next thing we need to do is get this battery out of here. Now this is going to involve the old soldering iron, and when I say old, it really is an oldie, but a goodie. It's a Weller WTCP-L, and before I turn it on, I actually want to put in my high temperature bit. So because I'm going to be working with getting this out of here as soon as possible, and I did turn it on briefly so it's a little warm, let's get that bit out of there. This is a high temperature bit. It's got an 8 written on the back. Let's bring that up to the camera so you can have a look. That means it's 800 degrees, not 700. It's got a little bit wider end to it. Let's get that on there and get this warming up. Get the pieces we don't need. And let's get the bits that we do need. Zoom in on this and see if we can't get my solder sucker down on there. Soldering iron, let's just tin the end, make sure it's coming up to temperature. looks pretty good. And let's see if we can, oh, like butter. Quite a lot of thermal pad to this, so desoldering them is not the easiest. That's why I decided to use the higher temperature bit. Also, this little solder sucker I got from Adafruit, and while it's small, it works so much better than the big blue ones. It really is a matter of, if you pay your money, you take your choice. This is a quality piece of kit. I believe it's made in Japan, and it's worth every penny. Well, that looks pretty good. I got most of the pin off. Let's give these a little wiggle. I think they're glued down as well. Let's see if we can... Yeah, it looks like it's freed from the board on that end. Yeah, it does look like they're freed from the board, so let's just pry these out. Underneath there's a little bit of tape, which is what's holding them in place. So there it is, and I don't want to forget which way was which. So before we get going too far, just going to make a note that this side was plus and this side was minus. Take those over there. Let's clean up the whiskers from inside and see what we can do to put some ends on these batteries. I think we can put some ends on these. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold them in a vise just put on the bench. Let's get a better view of this. Just hold it in there like that. I'm going to want to clean that end up as much as I can before putting a piece of wire on it. So I'm just going to take a little rub at it with some sandpaper and some 220. It's an old ratty piece, but that's fine. And we'll get a piece of wire to put on there. That should do the job. It's just a little piece of probably 18 or 20 gauge hookup wire. So let's see the best way of doing this. Now the first thing we need to do, let's get the end of the wire tinned up. So I'm just going to tin up this wire. Hold that in my clamps here. We'll just get some solder on the wire. And this is pretty old wire and it doesn't want to tin particularly well. Probably wouldn't have hurt to also hit that with some, but that'll work. Now the end of the battery here is where we're going to have a little bit of fun trying to get this to stick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a flux pen, and this MG Chemicals flux pen, just a little tiny bit on there. That'll help the solder stick. And this is why I went with a hot iron. So we should be able to warm up that area. Already the flux is starting to melt. Now, it seems counterintuitive. You don't want the battery to get too hot, so you use a hotter soldering iron. But in fact, in this case, what that means is we can hold the iron there for a shorter period of time. So I'm just going to heat that up again. We'll drop the wire in. Let it cool. And that should be in there nice and solid. So what I'll do is I'll get the other 4 done, and we'll continue on with this. So there we are, 2 batteries with tails on them. Now, the question that I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, well, how do you know the battery's dead? The shaver still worked. Well, the thing is, what happens with batteries is there's something called an internal resistance. And the internal resistance means that you have a voltage drop across the batteries when the batteries are in use. So while if you measured across the batteries without a load, you might get 1.2 or 1.3 volts for nickel metal hydride, probably closer to 1.3 for a fully charged battery. As soon as you give it load, the voltage drops significantly. So what I did is I made up this little tester because I was looking for good batteries. I'd done this previously. We'll just drop in a couple of batteries here, and it's going to be a little tight because now they've got tails on them. And what this allows us to do, I'll just get my meter in the frame here. We'll put the soldering iron off to the side for a moment. We could look at the voltage both with and without a load. So on the right hand side here, I have about 6 ohms. I have a bunch of resistors just to dissipate the heat. And if we measure the voltage without a load, you'll see that, get them the right way around, we've got about 2.7 volts. And when I turn the load on, which lights up this little LED, the voltage drops, but it only drops to 2.6. If we did this with the old batteries, I'm sure we'd see a much bigger drop. And we'll look back at the circuit board of how we're going to put these in. Well, we know they go back to front. That's the negative side. So this should just be a matter of pop our new wires through the holes. That's the positive side. And now it's just a matter of soldering those back in place. We'll zoom in, see if we can't get a nice view of the soldering in action. This is one of those things where it's really worthwhile using good solder. I use MG Chemicals. You can buy cheap solder from China. However, the flux in it just isn't as good. This should solder up beautifully. Get some nice and know when you're soldering that's not lead, that's actually just the flux, which is rosin, which comes from trees. I'm not super worried about it. Looks like I've got a little tiny solder bridge in here. Let's get a little bit of wick, get rid of the excess. Well, maybe that's just part of the original pad. Yeah, it looks like that's just part of the original pad. Should be good. I'll have a closer look at that. I'll put that under the close-up camera, and then we'll continue on with seeing how this all goes. Look, I'm just missing a tiny little bit of solder here. just get in there. That looks good now. Normally, my eyesight's not as good as it used to be. I'd probably do this under my magnifying lamp or use my head magnifier, but I think we're good here. Just carefully snip off the excess leads. And I think we can just reassemble this. Well, I'm back, and I think I found the problem. Right down in here, come on, focus you. Right down in here, and I'll put this, I'll put a little zoom in, but right down in here, there's a little solder bridge that looks like it needs to be connected in order for it to work. Basically from the battery straight out. So let's put that solder back in place and then try reassembling it again. In fact, before we do that, I'm going to get a little close-up picture of this so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've got a little blob of solder soldered back in here. I'll show a little close-up in a minute of that. But I think what we'll do is we'll put the whole thing back together now, and we'll see what happens. So this goes in like this. This really is a lovely bit of engineering. It all clips together so nicely with little pins. That sits on top there. And this just sits on top like that. And success! That's working a lot better than it did before. So I think we'll call this a success, a relatively inexpensive fix because I had the parts on hand, a couple of old nickel metal hydride batteries. I'll put this whole thing back together, and it goes together pretty much the way it came apart. 4 Torx screws on the outside. Just like that. Make sure it still works. Side pieces go on. I think there is actually a correct side and a wrong side, but this seems to be... Is that working? Yeah, I think that's the right way around. Maybe not. Let's try them this way. I didn't go on at all that way. Clip it on from the top. Then the little clip in the bottom, push it in from one side, clips in. Success! Well, there it is, battery replacement in the Braun 7526 shaver. Hopefully this will give me another more years of life. I've already had this for about 15 years. It's been an excellent shaver, and I look forward to having it for another 15. Well, thanks for watching, and if you like the video, give it a good thumbs up. Or, even better, hit the subscribe button, and there'll probably be more videos like this. Thanks for watching.